to this special part 2 of a special lecture series on taking care of the brain, feeding your brain. And we did had so many good reviews from last week's discussion of the difference between the right and the left side of the brain. And how many of you have been doing those exercises all week? I have. Wow. How many of you are right brainers and left brainers? Well, today he's going to continue. Dr. McBride's going to continue that discussion. He's going to also address the frontal lobe. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Daniel Abdul Rahman McBride, and they're all typing. They were doing exercises. They all are typing. So here you go. I'm going to turn it over to him, and you can go ahead and get started, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. This lecture is entitled The Quran and the Frontal Cortex. And then for any of the people that talk about the forelock, and I know some of the translations mean just the hair on the head, remember the description of a lying, sinning forelock, meaning it can't be just a forelock hair thing, because hair doesn't lie, right? Some people might lie about the hair, of which I can't, but the idea is that it's described as lying, sinning forelock when we talk about Abu Jahl. So it's very important to understand that, as far as I know, not being the biblical scholar, not being the Quranic scholar, but a lying, sinning forelock, and it would be more a reference of the frontal lobe. And that's why we are going to break down the frontal lobe into 5 subcortical areas today. But let me read the Quran first. Now, what I'd like to do is we're going to turn to Surah Hud, chapter 11 in the Quran, and we're going to start with verse 50. And to Ad people we sent their brother Hud. He said, O my people, worship Allah. You have no other ilah, God, but him. Certainly you do nothing but invent lies. Invent lies. O my people, I ask of you no reward for it, the message he brought. My reward is only from him who created me. Will you not then understand? And, O my people, ask forgiveness of your Lord, and then repent to him. He will send you from the sky abundant rain and add strength to your strength. So do not turn away as mujrimun, criminals, disbelievers in the oneness of Allah. They said, O Hud, no evidence have you brought us, and we shall not leave our gods for your mere saying, and we are not believers in you. All that we say is that some of our gods, false deities, have seized you with evil or madness. He said, I call Allah to witness, and here you witness that I am free from that which you ascribe as partners in worship with him, Allah. So plot against me, all of you, and give me no respite. I put my trust in Allah, my Lord and your Lord. There is not a moving, living creature, but he has grasp of its forelock. Verily, my Lord is on the straight path. So if you turn away, still, I have conveyed the message with which I was sent to you. My Lord will make another people succeed you, and you will not harm him in the least. Surely, my Lord is guardian over all things. And when our royal hour in the royal we earlier, and when our commandment came, we saved Hud and those who believed with him by a mercy from us, and we saved them from a severe torment. Such were Ad, the people. They rejected the ayah of their Lord and disobeyed his messengers and followed the command of every proud, obstinate, obsessed oppressor of the truth from their leaders. And they were pursued by a curse in this world, and so they will be on the day of resurrection. No doubt, verily, Ad disbelieved in their Lord, so away with Ad, the people of Hud. And again, when we talk about verse 56, but he has grasp of its forelock. Plenty of animals don't have hair. Plenty of mammals don't have hair. Well, let me think about that. Yeah, plenty of mammals don't have hair either. Whales, dolphins, orcas, right? plenty of creations don't have forelock hair. So we should give it an additional meaning of forehead, frontal lobe, what's important in there. And then when we go over to Surah 96, we keep going. Surah 96, al-alaq, and we'll read this from verse 1. Read in the name of your Lord who has created all that exists, has created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who has taught by the pen, taught writing, has taught man that which he knew not. Nay, verily, man does transgress against all bounds in disbelief and evil deeds, because he considers himself self-sufficient. Surely unto your Lord is the return. Have you, referencing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, seen him, an uncle, Abu Jahl, who prevents a slave, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he prays, interfering with his worship? Tell me if he, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is on the guidance of Allah or enjoins piety. Tell me if he, the disbeliever, denies the truth, the Quran, and turns away. Knows he not that Allah does see what he does? Nay, but if he, Abu Jahl, ceases not, we will catch him by the forelock, a lying, sinful forelock. Then let him call upon his council of helpers. We will call the guards of hell to deal with him. Nay, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do not obey him, Abu Jahl. Fall prostrate and draw near to Allah. So think about what's taking place there. How important is this forelock in the English translation, this frontal lobe? And I'm going to break down the 5 subcortical or the 5 areas, science terms or science names, of what each little area does. And it'll be a superficial description. I'll try to give you a lot of information, but I don't want to overwhelm you and bore you with too much science stuff. We can always cover Broadman areas another day. All right, the 5 subcortical areas of the frontal lobe. You've got a premotor and a supplementary motor area, and this is going to be in charge of or influence very complex movements. You've got the frontal eye field. That controls saccadic eye movement, jumping from side to side, trying to pay attention, and focused attention, which goes along with eye movement. Whatever we are looking at, we are going to pay attention to. As Muslims, we're encouraged to lower our gaze. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is hugely important to all of us. All of them are, but this is our thinking, our cognition, our math, our language, our communication. All of our complex thinking are executive functions of planning, organizing, and goal setting. And remember, right hemisphere is the long-term goal setting, and the left hemisphere then is going to be in charge of the day-to-day actions to achieve that long-term goal. So we've got a long-term picture. For example, in Islam, our long-term goal is, of course, to achieve Jannah. Our short-term goals, then every day, we're going to pray 5 prayers a day. We're going to give charity. We're going to smile to our brothers and sisters. We're going to do those day-to-day actions. The 4th area is called the orbital frontal cortex, and that is going to be emotional regulation and social behavior. And then, of course, number 5, right behind those is the anterior cingulate, and that's going to be motivation to get things done. Let's see, we can also explain it really quick, and I'll expound on this a little bit. Anterior cingulate regulates motivation. Orbital frontal cortex tied into that regulates social behavior. Dorsal prefrontal cortex regulates executive functions. The motor, premotor, and supplementary motor areas control motor function. The frontal eye field controls focused attention, and the anterior cingulate and motivation. Remember, the left hemisphere increases motivation, and that's going to be really important to tying in together, doing all the little things, right? That's the motivation, all the little things. Get everything done today. Pray 5 times a day to achieve the long-term goal of Jannah. And remember, again, as we said last week, it's really important, like with motivation, for example. If I'm too motivated, it'd be considered mania, right? We could talk about autism. They're super motivated on something very singular. That's why you see anger when you ask them to stop. They want to see it through that singular focus, see it through till the end until they're done. No matter what it is, whatever their singularly focused attention is on, okay? And that's the motivation side. So they're hyper motivated to pay attention to it. If you don't have enough motivation, that would be your depression side. You might have a big picture. How many of you, or myself also, how many times have we had a great idea? Just, this is the best idea we've ever had. But then we weren't being a right hemisphere idea, the big picture. We have this great idea, but then if the left side doesn't take it over to get it done, that's all it is. It's just a great idea. And think about how that relates to Islam. When we talk about Islam, we've got, again, if we're talking about the premotor, supplementary motor, and motor areas, these are not just complex movements, but it's actually, again, always fall back to right hemisphere, left hemisphere. Imagine you're going to commit a good deed. There, the idea pops in, right? Big idea. I'm going to do this good deed. But you lack the motivation, so you don't do it. So in Islam, at least you had the idea to do it, and you will get one reward because the idea was there. Pursuing that, when you're motivated to do it, then you get 1 to 10 to unlimited rewards for taking action on this. Think about what takes place. If it's a sin, motivation, motor area, combine those two together. You decide you're going to commit a sin, right? That's the idea. It moves over to the left side. You realize that it's going to be a sin, and you decide not to take the motor actions to commit that sin. Again, it's there, but then it moves back to the right side. The right side is also inhibition when it shouldn't be done. Or pretend you've got a project that has to be done by the end of the day. You're really focused, you're trying to get it done, but there's competing attention. There's you want to check your emails, but that's not going to help you finish this project. So imagine how the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere tie together with motivation. You're hyper motivated to get this project done, but then you're also, when they're working correctly together, the right side then says, I'm going to inhibit the motivation to pursue anything that distracts me. Does that make sense? So imagine now, if we can move it into autism or there's 3 different types of ADHD. Imagine if you're over here and you're hyper focused on this one thing, and this side is deficient. You're so hyper focused that there is no distraction. Your parents say, oh, we've got to go do this. Or, you're talking to your child. You're trying to explain to your child, let's stop this. We can get back to it. Well, imagine the left brain is the motivation, the initiation, and the go motivation. If that right brain is deficient or less than, if it's hypoactive and this is hyperactive, they are so focused on getting it done that no distraction gets in there. That's not even the right brain inhibiting distractions. It's the right brain not functioning at all. And that's where, again, if you remember last week when you talked about the emotions over here are happiness that you're getting what you wanted, surprise that you can't get what you want, anger that you're being disrupted and you can't get what you want. That's why we have these meltdowns with autism and stuff when we try to break up something that they're doing or changing their pattern. Then if we jump on to the frontal eye field, think about what's taking place. Most people are going to look at and pay attention to what they're going to do, what they're focused on. You look at what you're focused on. That's why we raised our kids. When I was younger, I had a real problem with eye contact. My parents would always tell me to look at people when I'm talking to them. Again, I tend to lean right. So I was, believe it or not, I was rather shy. I felt like eye contact was confrontation. So I didn't do it. I'd be looking somewhere else. Well, adults take that as you're not paying attention to them. You're not focused on them. You don't consider what they are talking about is important, right? So again, that's that frontal eye field. You're paying attention to, you're looking at what you consider important. And if someone is talking to you, they consider themselves and what they're saying is important. So they want you looking at them while they are talking. That's that focused attention. Number 3, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That area up right in this area here, frontal eye field is right behind that. You've got your motor area, your frontal eye field, your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. What else? Your orbital frontal cortex, and then your anterior cingulate is right behind those. When you're looking at your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, everything in your brain is important. But your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is that in-between area. You could consider it an association area. That is tying everything we're doing from frontal executive control stuff, the orbital frontal emotional control and regulation, with the orbital frontal cortex, and of course the anterior cingulate with the motivation. Right between that is your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That is executive functioning. That's, should I respond emotionally? Should I not respond emotionally? Should I respond at all? That's also planning. You had this great idea. You've got to take these actions. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is what you are going to use, or what you are using to figure out the different steps of that, to make plans like, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do this at 1 o'clock today. I'm going to finish by 2. I'm going to do this at 2:30. I'm going to fit eating in there. Like my day, or Muslims' day, we're going to get up and pray for Fajr. I know that's what we're going to do tomorrow. Whatever time Fajr falls in your area, then after Fajr, in my case, after I pray Fajr, then I am going to get up and come over here and type some more and finish the brain book I'm working on. Or, depending on what day it is, I'm going to go into the garage, believe it or not, with my 87-year-old mother, and we're going to work out a little bit. Then it's about getting ready for work, eating something, and then leaving to the office. So by 7:30, that's what I've done. I've prayed, I've either written or exercised, then I've had breakfast, and I've left for work. That is dorsolateral prefrontal cortex based on what I considered important. Does that make sense? And then when we talk about the orbital frontal cortex, hugely important in today's society. Most people, again, what we're seeing in America and all over the world, with fascism, with genocide, with everything that's taking place, we're becoming a very, very much a left brain society. It's all go, go, go. It's all motivation to get what I want, get what I want, get what I want. And there's no right brain, empathy, emotion, sensitivity. We're not trying to fit into society at all. We're not so much trying to fit in, but fitting in is important. That's what the right hemisphere likes to do, is appropriate societal behavior. And in this case, in the orbital frontal cortex, it's really important. Or if I can give you an example, I was talking to a patient, and with the background they gave me, and a minority, I should say non-white. And with that said, I was asking, I'm not a big fan of the recently elected overweight white guy, and not to name any names. And they surprised me and said they were. And I made the statement before, and they were like, "Oh, we won't argue now because we get along." So, oh no, absolutely not. We're not going to argue. But the idea is, then I said, before we talk politics, let me ask you 2 questions. Okay. I said, and this is orbital frontal cortex. I said, if you were running a business, would you hire a sexual predator or a convicted sexual offender? And they said no. And I said, then what about, would you hire a convicted fraudster or someone that's been convicted of lying, cheating, and stealing? And they said no. I said, so you wouldn't hire this person to work in your business, but you'll hire them to run the country. So what happens in the orbital frontal cortex is you could have good, moral, social, right-brained ideas, right? You don't want a rapist, you don't want a fraudster, you don't want a sexual predator, you don't want them around you and your business, around you and your family, you just don't want them around. And yet, with that moral grounding, and yet you would hire that person to run your country. There's a disconnect with that emotional control center, because now what they do, and it's the big override. If I can convince you to be afraid of something, then that interferes with the orbital frontal cortex and the prefrontal cortex. That interferes with the frontal lobe's ability to make a good, logical decision. Does that make sense? And the orbital frontal cortex is really important to regulating emotion and your social behavior. And if that's not working, if this whole frontal cortex isn't working, then right behind that are your limbic centers, your emotional centers, and they'll be out of control. They will be, and fear is the great override. Remember, when we talk about right hemisphere and left hemisphere, fear resides on the right. You could be, along with empathy and wanting to do good by others, the motivation is being afraid of being pushed out of the group. As society developed millennia ago, it was very important for us to fit into these 10 people groups, these 100 people groups, these little villages, it was important for us to fit in, because living by ourselves, if nothing else, you got animal predators, if we don't even count human predators, right? So fitting into society is hugely important, and it's a very right hemisphere principle. And that's why I say in today's society now, we are moving into the left, where it's all selfishness, me, me, me. Right is social, left is selfish. And that's and the big control of that is this frontal area, and particularly, like I said, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and that orbital frontal cortex, which is right here. And then, of course, the fifth area, the anterior cingulate cortex, hugely important for motivation. And then it's also considered in some books and by some scholars, it's also really super closely tied to emotional regulation and emotional control. The more motivation you have, the more, hopefully good, emotional ties are to that to get it done. Very rarely do happiness and anger go together, right? But fear and anger travel very closely together. It's interesting that anger is on the left side, and that's your more motivating side. Anger, as a good emotional response, could stem from frustration. And again, if you can look at that, the autistic picture, they get angry, they're not done, they want to push through it, and that anger keeps them motivated to achieve that goal. You want to donate $100,000 this year to a good cause. You try to donate it to one organization, doesn't go through. You start getting a little frustrated. Your anger, your motivation, your wanting to do something good, even here, trying to do something good, that anger and that frustration may push you, maybe you jump from that organization over to this organization, but you're going to get it done. You're going to donate that money, aren't you? So anger to get something done, as long as it fits in with the norms of society, is actually considered a good emotion. Happiness, anger, and initiation are all good emotions as long as they're balanced by the right side. And again, the anterior cingulate, right behind everything I've talked about up here, right behind that is the motivation area, and that is tied really closely into the limbic system, which is, if you want to go with a real short definition, that's your limbic system is your emotional response to everything. And that's why you can imagine being pulled or being grasped, controlled by that forelock or that frontal lobe area and those 5 subcortical areas. You're moving to or away from sin, supplemental motor and premotor area. Your frontal eye field, you're paying attention to good stuff. You're reading Quran or you're looking at Haram. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, you're planning, you're engaging, all of your executive functions, right? And if you're planning, I'm going to read today's Thursday, Juma is tomorrow, so we should be reading Surat Al-Kahf, chapter 18. So the plan is, my plan, inshallah, in a little bit, will be to read Surat Al-Kahf before I go to bed, inshallah. If not, I listen to it being played in my car in both the Arabic and English translations as I go to work and go to the masjid to get it done before Maghrib tomorrow night. And I left off one area, didn't I? Premotor frontal, dorsal prelateral frontal cortex, orbital frontal cortex, anterior cingulate. No, that's really good. That's it. Now, think about what's really important. And I want to end, believe it or not, 6:37, I want to stop instructing. There are a couple games that are really, really easy to do. And you can do them to strengthen your whole frontal lobe. 2 games. One's a card game. Hopefully it's considered haram. It's not gambling or anything. The first game is card grab. What you're going to do is get a deck of cards. Get 1 red suit and 1 black suit. And I'd recommend as you start, take the face cards out. So you just want ace, and you consider that 1. You want ace through 10. Shuffle those together. Hugely important. Frontal lobe strengthening. You're going to shuffle those cards together. And what my kids and I do, we'll actually set a timer to see who can get it done the fastest with the fewest mistakes. And then we add like half a second to your time if you touch it with the wrong hand. Now, what you're going to do with these 2 cards, shuffle red and black together and just use 2 different suits. You don't have to use all 4. The first step, you're going to take, and again, card grab, you're going to take these 22 cards. You're going to take these 22 cards, shuffle them together, ace through 10. And then what you're going to do is pretend you're playing with me right now. I'm going to hold the deck. We get ready, and then I'll let you hit go on the cell phone or on your timer. When you hit go, I start flipping cards. Every time you take a card, I lay down another one as quick as I can, right? What you're going to do, remember it this way. This is easy. Red color right, black color left. When I flip the card, you grab that color card hand appropriate. Like I said, if we're going red and black, right and left, every time a red card comes up, you're going to grab it with your right hand. Every time a black card comes up, you're going to grab it with your left hand and pull it back, okay? So I'm going to turn them over as fast as I can so that I don't delay you. Let's be honest. Allah watches everything, and we're trying to train and improve ourselves. So what I do is I flip it, you grab it. I flip it, you grab it. I flip it, you grab it. And remember, red and right, black and left. Now what you're going to do, okay, do that a couple times and take the average of, say, 3 times, right? You run it once, run it twice, run it 3 times, and then switch, see who was faster. Now, what you're going to do is shuffle them up, and you're going to go even or odd. Yes, even or odd. You're going to take the even numbers, pretend you take the even numbers with your left hand. Take the odd numbers with your right hand, regardless of what the colors are. And now what you're doing, I mentioned last week, I mentioned go, no-go games. This is a go, no-go game. You see what you're supposed to do, you go. If you're not supposed to do it, no go. That's both initiation, go, and inhibition, no go. And then think about what you're doing. You're using frontal eye field. You're using your motor, premotor, and supplementary motor areas. You're using your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. All of this planning, executive function, I'm going, I'm not going. You're tying your whole frontal lobe in, and you're tying in your right and left halves. Really hard for younger kids because a lot of this is still developing, and your frontal polar area, area number 10, is still finishing, and that's not until the mid-20s. Girls a little sooner than guys. Surprise. So what you're going to do is, again, that's your go, no go. Take two colors and blend them, the red and the black. Take two suits, shuffle them together, and then the first round is just red, black, red, black, red, black. Shuffle them up, and you can't tell what's coming next. So you're going. And the only go, no go is whether it's red or black, right? And then what you're going to do is you've got to override and learn the new function, or the new rule is what it's called. And that's when you bring in, no matter what color it is, even, odd, even, odd, 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 even, odd, right? That's your go, no go game. And that's how it ties all of them in together. And then, of course, the orbital frontal cortex, 11 and 12, are really important because hopefully you're going to control or inhibit your anger and frustration. Use your anger to go faster and better, but don't get upset with anybody because it's you, right? And then your anterior cingulate to keep you motivated without getting emotional. Great game called Card Grab. And then if you want to, you can add the face cards. And what you do there is just for a little trick with that, and it's a super advanced game when I'm dealing with these kind of things. I wait until later. This is towards the end of a care plan with my brain trauma patients, with my older ADHD, with my older autism kids. This is a challenging game. So this is what we consider a higher cortical function, especially with inhibition and initiation at the same time. So this is something I save literally for later. But the same games I use to train and test patients, you can use bringing that in and helping yourself get even better. If you're good already, then you want to train it in to be great. And if you're not good, then we'll build up to it using this stuff. Does that make sense? And then the next game is really cool. And if you wanted to, you don't have to say anything, but this is a really easy game. What you're going to do is hold up your right hand and your left hand. And then what we're going to do is, this is my right, this is my left. What we're going to do is every time I flick up a finger and your hand, do it matching. Okay. So there you are. Your hand, your hand. Every time I flick up the finger 1, you flick up 2. Every time I flick up 2, you flick up 1. So there's 2, you're doing 1. There's 2, you're doing 1. There's 1, you're doing 2. There's 1, you're doing 2. Make sense? So this is how it goes. And we're just going to do this. So hold your hands up, and you don't have to tell us if you do well or not. And in this game, there's a room for just a couple of mistakes. If you're doing it to test someone or to improve things, you expect 2 mistakes. Anything more than that, and you start getting worried, or you've got to work up to it. So here we go, and you try to make it, and you do 10 and make it random. Ready? Your hands are up. Here we go. Okay, so I tried to go fairly quickly, but that's how we do it, and that's how we do it at the house. And you can see how literally, you've got to override. A lot of people will want to match me, right? I flick up two, you flick up two. Excuse me. I flick up two, you flick up two. I flick up one, you flick up one. And then, okay, I've got it. He did one, I do one. He did two, I do two. He did two. Wait, I did one. No, wait. Okay. You see what I'm saying? So then you start going, I did one on this hand last time. I want to do one again. No, I've got to do, and there you go. And you train it in. You can start, and I recommend going real slow, warming it up. And then phase 2 of this game, I'll get back to it. So phase 2 of this game is then just the fingers, right? 1 or 2, 1 or 2. And what you're going to do is I flick up 1, you flick up 2. I flick up 2, you don't flick up anything. Go, no go. So I flick up 2, you don't flick up anything. I flick up 2, you don't flick up anything. I flick up 1, you flick up 2. I flick up 1, you flick up 2. I flick up 1, you flick up 2. I flick up 2, you flick up nothing. Does that make sense? And that's how that goes. So imagine what you're doing here. You're using, like I said, the motor action, right? Motor, premotor, supplementary motor. You're using your frontal eye field because you are looking and focused in, aren't you? Focused attention. And it's really cool. If you want to do it more than 10 and you want to carry it out to 15, you want to carry it out to 20, you train in focused attention with something like that. If you want to train in focused attention with your cards, it's the same thing. Rather than just using 2, you use all 4, and you just keep going, even though you may be getting frustrated and you may be distracted because I made a mistake and I touched it with my left, not my right. That's all fine. You're training in focused attention. And then, of course, your little frontal cortex, reining in your emotional stuff, your social behavior, right? And overriding the anterior cingulate and stuff. Your orbital frontal cortex and your anterior cingulate overriding your emotional limbic side. And with the card game, I meant to say, with the card game, you can add in the face cards, if I hadn't mentioned it already, add in the face cards, and then what you're going to do is every time the face card pops up, particularly with the colors, if you're doing it with the color part of the game and not the numbers, then what you're going to do is with the colors, say, it's a red king and red is the right hand or left hand. Let's go red left this time. So the red card pops up, the red king pops up. Rather than touching it, you stomp your foot, then you grab it. So you add lower body movement also. So you're bringing in even more motor control, even more brain down all the way to the foot and tying the hand and foot together. And then if you want to get crazy, you stomp the opposite foot like you're walking, training the right and left to work together. You stomp the right foot, but you grab it with your left hand. Stomp the left foot, grab it with your right hand. Does that make sense? So these are a couple of really cool games. And if I went really fast, listen to this part again, because these are great trainers for your frontal lobe. Okay. Sister, do we have any questions?